Ted Koppel, the meeting in Iraq, Iranian, Syrian, Iraqis, U.S. What should we think about it?
Had to happen. I made a little note here of something that Ambassador Khalilzad said to you a moment ago. He said the region will not be stable until Iraq is stabilized. It's the one thing nobody talks about. Everyone is concerned about the United States being in the middle of a civil war inside Iraq. But they forget about the fact that if U.S. troops were to pull out of Iraq, that civil war could become a regional war between Sunnis and Shia. And the region, just in case anyone has forgotten, is the Persian Gulf, where we get most of our oil, and you and I have talked about this before, natural gas. So the idea of pulling out of there and letting that national civil war expand into a regional civil war, something the United States cannot allow to happen.
Michael Beschloss, Ted Koppel, you are tonight airing on Discovery Channel a special called Our Children's War. The long war, as you call it repeatedly, that this war on terror is much more than just Iraq, and it's going to go on for a long time.
It could go on. General Abazade, with whom I spoke, talks in terms of generations. And if you think about two things, that's not so hard to imagine. Number one, the Cold War, after all, lasted 50 years. We didn't know it when we began it. We didn't know how long it was going to be when we were in the middle of it, but lasted half a century. If you look back at the elements of the war against terrorism, that war was going on and has been going on for the past 24 years. We just didn't connect the dots. 24 years ago, the precursors of Hezbollah blew up the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon. That was 1983, 241 Americans killed. In the interim, between then and now, you had two attacks on the World Trade Center. You had the blowing up of Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. You had the attempt to blow up the USS Cole. You had the bombing of the two U.S. embassies in East Africa. This war has already been going on for 24 years. We were just a little bit slow to recognize it.
Let me show you, Ted Koppel, what do you see?
I see a lot of wishful thinking going on here in Washington right now. When Congress talks about, first of all, setting these milestones, and the irony is, if the Iraqis successfully meet the milestones, the implication is we stay. If they fail to meet the milestones, we leave. It doesn't make any sense at all. It ought to be the other way around. If they fail, we stay because they need us. If they succeed, we can start to pull out again. So I have this feeling that, on the one hand, the Democrats are making a great deal of hay out of saying we have to get out of Iraq, and indeed we do at some point or another. But the notion that the war will be over when we pull out of Iraq, and even after we pull out of Afghanistan, you heard what General Abazade had to say. It's not going to be over. It's going to be a different war, but the war continues.
Our children's war.
Exactly.